I want to tell you about a man called Ray. Ray was 63 years old. He'd worked in the same place for 38 years, on the factory floor first, then in the office upstairs. A good man, hard-working, the sort who never complains. When the time came to retire, Ray said one thing to his wife Sandra. "Just one more year, Sandra. One more year and then that's it, I promise." Sandra had heard that same sentence at 60, and at 61, and at 62. Ray was absolutely convinced that every extra year at his desk made his retirement a little safer, a little more secure, and it felt completely reasonable. The trouble is, Ray never actually sat down and did the maths. He was putting away roughly £10,000 a year, sounds decent enough, 4 extra years, £40,000. But here's what Ray didn't know. The average cost of a care home in England today is around £1,500 a week, not a 5-star hotel on the Cornish coast, an ordinary plus, standard care, unremarkable food. Divide 10,000 by 1,500 a week. That gives you just over 6 weeks, 52 weeks of early alarms, stressful meetings and putting life off until later, in exchange for 6 weeks in a care home. Today, I'm going to tell you what financial advisors rarely explain on their polished charts. Why in the UK, saving beyond a certain point stops making sense. Why just one more year might be the most expensive illusion you're allowing yourself. And, later in this video, about a mistake with the family home that thousands of British families make and that the local council can challenge years after the fact. If you've ever thought about signing your house over to your children, please do stay until we get to that part. Stay with me. Let's start with the numbers. Not because I particularly enjoy numbers, but because this is where the truth hides. The truth that doesn't make it into pension fund brochures. The average cost of a care home in England, I've mentioned this already, but I want it to land properly, is around £1,500 a week. In a year, that's roughly £78,000. £78,000 a year for a room you didn't choose, food you didn't order, surrounded by people you've never met. Now let's look at someone who decides to work one more year in their late 50s or early 60s. Say they manage to put away £10,000 clear, a solid amount. They look at the bank statement and feel rather pleased with themselves. But £10,000 divided by 1,500 a week is just over 6 weeks, 52 weeks of your life, 6 weeks of care. And this is where a story begins, one that feels unfair on the surface, but is really just honest. Let me introduce you to John and Peter. They worked at the same company, lived in the same area, both retired at around the same time, but with very different amounts in the bank. John decided to work 4 years longer. He saved, he cut back, he skipped holidays. By the time he retired, he had £100,000. Peter left earlier. He had £30,000. John felt the smarter one, the more responsible one, the more prepared one. Several years later, both men's health declined. Both ended up in a care home, in the same area, in identical rooms. And that's when John discovered something nobody had told him. In the UK, there is a threshold, a level of assets below, which the state begins to help with the cost of care. The current figure you'll find on gov.uk. It changes from time to time, so do check. Peter, with his 30,000, reached that threshold fairly quickly. After that, the state stepped in. John, with his 100,000, paid for everything himself, week after week, watching his savings melt away. They lived in the same rooms, ate the same meals, were looked after by the same staff. The only difference was that John had given up 4 years of his life to pay for something Peter received at almost no cost to himself. I'm not telling you this to upset you. I'm telling you because nobody explained this to John in time, and I don't want you to find out the same way he did. But wait, because there's something else. And it's exactly what most people think of the moment they hear John and Peter's story. They think, right, well then, I'll just sign the house and the savings over to the children now. Then I'll have nothing in my name and the council will cover it. If that's precisely what just crossed your mind, the next few minutes are particularly important for you, because this is where thousands of British families walk straight into a trap they cannot get out of. There's a family I'll call the Harrisons. The mother, Margaret, 72 years old, a widow, living in the house she and her husband spent 30 years paying off. A decent house. Prices in their area had risen considerably over the decades. Margaret read something online about care home fees. It frightened her, so she decided to sign the house over to her son, Tom, to protect it from the system. Tom was glad to help. They went to a solicitor. The paperwork was done. Margaret breathed out. The house was in Tom's name now. She felt safe. 3 years later, Margaret's health deteriorated. She needed care. The local council carried out a financial assessment, and that's when something rather unpleasant came to light. Local authorities in the United Kingdom have a legal power. It's called deliberate deprivation of assets. If the council decides that you transferred property specifically to avoid paying for care, they can treat that property as still belonging to you. And here's what most people simply don't know. There is no 7-year rule here, as there is with inheritance tax. Wait 7 years and you're in the clear. That's not how this works. The local council can look back through your financial history as far as they like. 1 year, 5 years, 10. If they conclude that the transfer was made to avoid care fees, they will assess you as though the house is still yours, and they will refuse to help. Margaret thought she'd protected the house. What she'd actually done was add legal complication to an already difficult situation, and her family paid for that, in money and in worry. I've seen this happen many times, and every time it isn't recklessness, it's people trying to do the right thing without the full picture in front of them. What actually works? I'll come to that in a moment, but first there's something else, something the pension industry never puts in its brochures. Most people planning their retirement ask themselves one question: will my money last until I'm 85, 90? It's a sensible question, but it isn't the only question, and for many people it isn't even the most important one, because there's another question, one that rarely gets asked out loud. How many years of genuine good health do I have left to spend this money on the things that actually matter to me? The Office for National Statistics, the UK's official statistical body, tells us that the average healthy life expectancy in this country ends at around 63 years old. You can find the current figures on the ONS website. 63. That doesn't mean life ends at 63, not at all. But it is around that age that health conditions stop being occasional visitors and start accumulating. Joints that weren't a problem at 58 begin limiting you at 64. The energy that used to carry you through long walks starts to change. I have to be honest with you about something. Early in my career, I gave people different advice. I told them to build the biggest possible financial buffer, to plan for every scenario out to 95, to keep saving. I believed that more money always meant more security. I was wrong. I'll never forget one particular person. He retired with savings that most people could only dream of. Financially, he was in almost perfect shape. He died less than 2 years after leaving work. His wife said something to me afterwards that I've never forgotten. We spent decades preparing for retirement, but we barely got to live it. That sentence changed the way I think about all of this. In all my years of doing this work, I have never once heard anyone say, I wish I'd spent more time at the office, but I've heard the opposite many, many times. All right, I suspect you're thinking, George, that's all very touching, but what am I actually supposed to do about it? Just spend everything and hope for the best? No, of course not. There is a sensible approach, a legal one, and honestly, a rather more enjoyable one than most of the financial strategies you've probably been offered. Here is the paradox at the heart of the UK social care system. It can assess your savings, it can assess your investments, it can take your home into account, but it cannot take away the memory of a trip with your family. It cannot reclaim the years you spent alongside your grandchildren. It cannot recover the money you wisely spent improving your life while you still had the health to enjoy it. This isn't a suggestion to spend recklessly. It's an invitation to think differently. Rather than deferring life in pursuit of a number in a bank account, think about what brings you genuine value right now. A holiday with your children while you can still walk without a stick. Helping grandchildren with their education. A legitimate and sensible way of passing money to family during your lifetime. Regular gifts from surplus income. There are entirely lawful ways of doing this within the existing rules. The details are on gov.uk, or speak with a qualified advisor. And if the question of passing on your home or other assets to your children is on your mind, please do speak with a qualified solicitor or financial advisor before making any decision. Not because it's complicated, but because one sound conversation costs considerably less than one unsound transaction. I'm not your financial advisor. I've never claimed to be, but I've seen enough people on both sides of this decision to know which side it's better to be on. Let's come back to Ray, the man we started with. Ray Ray eventually retired at 65, 2 years later than he could have done. In those 2 years, he saved an additional £20,000. But here's what Ray didn't do in those 2 years. He didn't take Sandra to Scotland. They'd been meaning to go for years and kept putting it off. He wasn't there for his grandson's graduation. He missed 2 summers in the allotment he loved. When I asked him about it, once he was finally retired, he went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "George, there's only one thing I regret, not leaving sooner. Money can be earned again. Time cannot. So here are 3 questions I'd ask you to sit with this week. First, work out honestly. How much money does one more year actually bring you? And how many weeks of care does that buy? Just do the simple division. Second, ask yourself, what exactly are you putting off for the sake of that money? Which trips? Which moments with family? Which years? Third, if passing on your home or assets to your children is something you're considering, speak with a qualified professional before signing anything that cannot be undone. Retirement isn't the finish line of a savings race. It's the moment when money finally starts working for you, rather than the other way around. But only if you still have the health to make use of it. Tell me in the comments, honestly, would you choose one more year of work for the extra savings? Or would you retire sooner and live those years instead? I'm genuinely interested in what you think, because I've seen people on both sides of this decision, and there's truth in both. And if someone in your family or among your friends is standing at exactly this crossroads right now, show them this video. Let them make up their own mind.